So I'm Christy McDonald. You know, there's a lot of conversation on the island here about Michigan, where we're headed, where we are right now, and also talking about the city of Detroit and investment there. Joining me now to talk about that is Dave Blaszkiewicz. He's the CEO of Invest Detroit. Hey, Dave, it's good to see you.
Good to see you as
and
well.
Dave Egner, he is the CEO of the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. Dave, it's always good to see you as well.
Always good to see you.
You know, I loved having both of you here and talking about investment, also from philanthropy, and in talking about some of the money that we need to infuse into the businesses, into the real estate, and that's so desperately needed that may not be able to get it from regular sources. So as we kind of take a larger bird's eye view, Dave, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
Talk to me a little bit about how Detroit and investment in Detroit has changed in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about what has taken place over the last 5 years, and it is a tremendous shift. Anybody who's been to downtown Detroit in the last couple of years has seen a absolute transformation of the downtown. What we're seeing now is a building off of that base that has been created, and that activity moving to the neighborhoods. We're also seeing that move throughout the business environment, and seeing more and more investment taking place in startup companies, in retail companies. Detroit has experienced a great deal of growth across the environment, but there are many places that it is going to take several years to see those improvements.
Yeah, and Dave, and you've been able to take a look at it from a couple of different angles, first with Hudson Weber and now with Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. Talk to me in the sense of where kind of Detroit stands when you take a look and you're talking to people around here and how they're viewing Detroit and investment in Detroit right now.
Well, first of all, the conference vibe is so different than it would have been 10 years ago.
Right.
Tremendous progress. We need to celebrate that. We need to celebrate what we're seeing in rising real estate values and how neighborhood activity is starting to happen in the city. But we also have to be aware that if you look nationally, we're still behind. So we still have more work to do. And that's not to say the progress hasn't been great, but it does say we've got further challenges, and we have to continue to think big and push hard.
So when we look at foundation investment, and when you look at seeing, okay, where we're going to be able to put dollars and make sure that things can happen. I mean, you look at the investment you've done on the Riverwalk, but also now you're helping with business who can maybe not get the funding that they so desperately need. What are some of the programs that you're investing in right now that you think are making some of the biggest differences?
Well, pleased that we have such a great relationship with Invest Detroit and this guy. I mean, the work that they're doing to fill gaps, particularly with the venture fund and how it's affecting the startup community, and some work in real estate subsidy and trying to get development done. That's been a big part of this work. Also then philanthropy, I think in general, not just the Wilson Foundation, Hudson Weber, is looking at what I'll call the ecosystem of funding and the ecosystem of entrepreneurship. It is a network of hundreds of activities, not just one or two. And I think if there's been a change in the last 10 years, it's been the realization of that. You can't put an investment in one institution and say, we're done, it's working. Mm-hmm. You've got to invest broadly, and you've got to invest in this kind of networked approach so everything overlaps and layers on top of each other.
And it's got to be a constant reevaluation.
Absolutely.
As well as things change. And then just what you're talking about, Dave, in the last 5 years, how things have changed in the city of Detroit. What are some of the challenges that that entrepreneurs and startups are facing, though, still? Even though it's gotten a little bit easier, there are still some challenges.
Yeah, and
though.
actually this is one of the areas where we're working hand in glove with our friends at Ralph Wilson Foundation. One of the biggest challenges that we face, in fact, the Michigan Venture Capital Association just put out a report not too long ago that talked about where capital is available for new ventures. Only 7% of that is actually going towards what they would call pre-seed or seed, the very early stage investing for these companies. We're focusing on creating a more sustainable source of financing for the front side of that process. When companies are starting up, they should be focused on building their business plan, on moving their company forward. They're spending a ton of time just trying to find limited capital in that space. The challenge has been that these dollars kind of ebb and flow. So folks open and shut their spigots, and provide support to those companies when that capital is available. We want to create a more sustainable source of capital for those entrepreneurs, so that is a more consistently available piece of financing. We think by really focusing on the top of the funnel, the beginning portions, of these businesses, that creates a lot more throughput for folks to take those handoffs and help build and grow and develop those companies. We've got a lot of resources as we get further into the process, but that front side is very difficult.
Yeah,
to
the
deal with.
initial just to kind of
That's
get
right.
going, but then be able to have kind of the wraparound of helping people move forward with the business, saying, all right, well, if this is what you want to do, then we've got the people who have done this before and that can kind of help you be able to do it.
Exactly.
Dave, it still is staggering to me the role that foundations are playing in the city of Detroit and its continual moving forward, and whether it's downtown and now we're talking about development out in the neighborhoods. What role do you see foundations playing still in the city of Detroit, whether it's neighborhood development or even we're looking at education?
It's a great question. It's an evolving answer. It should change. Detroit, Southeast Michigan, blessed with great philanthropic resources. The challenge is the philanthropic resources have to interface them with private resources and with public sector resources. So that role should change as the public sector and the private sector morph and change and roll in different directions. So today I would say that the majority of the philanthropic work is looking at the issues of access and equity. We see downtown and midtown growing to a market pace. How do we make sure that the neighborhoods are also receiving resources and planning and capacity to also reach that point of growing at a market pace? And then the same thing in terms of education and other resources. How do we make sure equity and access is in play? As the public sector picks up and helps fill those gaps, we'll again have to change. So my answer may be different next year.
Right, exactly. Dave, let me ask you, when we kind of take a look down the road and we said we couldn't have anticipated maybe 10 years ago where Detroit would be now, kind of give me a magic 8-ball look of where you're thinking in 5 years from now when you're looking at business plans and when you're looking at moving the organization ahead. Where do you think we're going to be in 5 years?
Well, I think we're going to see a lot of activity taking place in those neighborhoods. And in fact, much like we did with the midtown and downtown areas, as Dave was just referencing, you've built this core and then you have kind of this concentric ring. You build around further and further out from that center. What we're working on now are a series of investments across the city to build those cores out at the neighborhood level. I think 5 years from now, what you're going to see is not only stabilized, core neighborhoods, but you're going to begin to see them linked to each other through other assets. You'll also see a real push on the job side to make sure that there's proximate opportunity. And by that, I mean that there are jobs located in close proximity to where those reestablished and revitalized neighborhoods are.
Yeah, because transportation has always been a huge issue in the city. And when you're linking people up with jobs and even with job training to making sure that they can get to the places that they need to go to. Dave, I'm going to let you have the last word on this and kind of taking a looking forward to the city and where we need to go and where you're going to see future investment, maybe from the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation.
So I would, there's so many opportunities. It's a matter of how do you prioritize those. And I still think we've got to continue to push this issue of how we behave as a region. The city is one component of that, and we still somewhat isolate the city from the rest of the region. Frankly, there's no working metro area in the country that doesn't have a strong urban core, and so Detroit's future is the region's future, and we have to continue to embrace that. And this issue of transportation is the most evasive thing. We've got to get our heads around that. We've got to move people from point A to point B, but maybe more importantly, millennials and the people who will be our future workforce, they don't want to drive cars the same way. So how do we develop a transit strategy that serves the region now but is reactive to the new technology coming online? So these are terribly important pieces. And one more point would be public space. I think we're finding as you look globally, public space, its maintenance, how people interact and engage in a public space is critical. So our parks and trail systems, I think, will be a very, very important part of the future.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the investment for the riverfront.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of an investment there. $50 million to Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Park and $50 million to the regional trail system. So, and I think that's the tip of the iceberg of what will be a much larger set of investment, not just from us, but across the region in those very important pieces of work.
Gentlemen, it was great to have you at the desk, Dave Blaszkiewicz and Dave Egner. It was good
great.
to see you. Enjoy
Thanks
the
so
rest of the
much.
conference.
Thanks.